Hello, this is Brian. Today is Tuesday, June 13th, 2023, and I'm here on the outskirts of Balboa Park along the noisy California 163, and I want to do an ode video today. First ode video I've done in a little while. I kind of want to do an ode to some interesting specimens of Torrey Pines here near the edge of the Cabrillo Freeway on Balboa Park. So here we have, these are Torrey Pines. Yes, you see that correctly. These are Torrey Pines. This is Pinus torreyana, subspecies torreyana. This is the one that's native to the really small swath of the coastline from about La Jolla to just north of Del Mar. It looks a lot different than you would expect to see. It's not all short, stubby, and windswept. These ones are actually very tall, very, very tall, and very narrow, very upright trees. Now, being tall and upright for a Torrey pine should not be something out of the ordinary for when you see the tree in cultivation. Because when the tree is in cultivation and it's not being blasted by the winds of the ocean to assume those contorted shapes and profiles, Torrey pines can grow quite upright. Typically, Torrey pines are narrowly to broadly oval when they're in cultivation. A lot of those pines over there, some of these are Canary Island pines, but some of these more rounded ones, those are Torrey pines in cultivation. So why are we looking at these really tall, wispy Torrey pines here? So what's the deal? Why are they growing like this? I wish I could give you a satisfactory answer, but I notice a lot of the pine trees, we also got some Canary Island pines, Pinus canariensis, planted here that are very tall and very upright, very tall, taller than you usually see them. But I'm trying to figure out why these Torrey pines are growing like this. Now, you might have seen my spotlight video from a couple years ago. Maybe you saw it was actually had broken up into two parts. That was before I had the editing software to get my videos all together. But I did a spotlight on the Torrey pine in the bottom of a canyon in Torrey Pines State Reserve Extension area, which was a very large, girthy, fairly tall, but not nearly as tall as these. So you get to see what the tree looks like when it's in protected areas like canyons where there's access to moisture and it's not being blown sideways by the gale force of the ocean wind. But what I'm looking at here is at first sight, somebody might mistake these for gray pines, just judging by the way they're growing. So they do look a lot like gray pines the way they're growing here in this little spot. Very tall, upright, but also kind of slouched to the side a little bit and very, very sparsely crowned. So these are very much like the gray pines, Pinus sabiniana, that you find rimming around the foothills and lower mountains of the Central Valley. Very similar. A lot of the trees are like this, very thinly foliated, and a lot of times lack branches till higher up, or sometimes they fork and assume really interesting shapes. So why am I talking about gray pine when I'm supposed to be talking about Torrey pine? Well, I don't normally see Torrey pines growing like their gray pine brethren. And gray pines, Pinus sabiniana, are a very close relative of the Torrey pine. So that's why I'm choosing to do an ode video here in this spot on these particular trees that are growing much unlike you would expect to see them either in the habitat or in cultivation. So as you can see up on the hill there, those broadly crowned trees there, those are Torrey Pines as well. Those are Torrey Pines in cultivation. That's Pinus torreyana, subspecies torreyana in cultivation. So they're very luscious, very densely crowned, and very well foliated. So they have a broad, rounded crown, and yet these ones here look like gray pines in the Sierra Nevada foothills. That's why I was kind of making the connection between these individual Torrey Pines here and the gray pines of the Sierra and Coast Range foothills. It's because how eerily similar these Torrey Pines look to those gray pines in the foothills. So that's why I kind of got a little excited and overzealous and had to come and get some footage of these trees. Very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and just take a couple pictures of these trees, and then I'm going to try to see if I can move on to see some more typical Torrey Pines you find in cultivation. So before I do move on, here's just something to consider. Now, gray pines and Torrey pines can be quite similar, and to somebody not well versed in how to differentiate them, quite similar and hard to tell apart. The major difference is Torrey pines, despite being a type of yellow pine like the gray pine is in the yellow pine group, the ponderosa section of the pine family. So it's related to the ponderosa pine, the Jeffrey pine here in California in the mountains. It's related to the coulter pine, also mostly in our mountains and higher foothills, and also the gray pine. So what we want to talk about is that gray pines have much larger cones that have very sharp claws at the edge of the cone scales, and they're very heavy and can do a lot of damage. Second only in Pinaceae, the pine family, second only in Pinaceae to coulter pines, which even have larger cones than gray pines, and heavier cones, and even larger claw scales. Torrey pines have quite decent sized cones as well. Their cones get to about this long, about 5 inches long and about 4 inches wide, and they're more rounded, and they have a prickle at the end of the cone scale, but it doesn't have a humongous sharp claw like coulter pine and gray pine. So that's one difference. If you're thinking you're looking at gray pine in some barren area, if it doesn't have big claws on the cone scales, it's probably going to be a Torrey pine. So another way is that Torrey pines have less grayish green. They have grayish green in their color, but less so than gray pines. So, and despite the fact that these are already thinly crowned trees, gray pines are even more thinly crowned than these. And their needles give off more of a wispy aspect. So the needles themselves are airier than these Torrey pines. So I know for a fact I don't even have to really look to know that I'm not looking at gray pines. Now, gray pines could probably be amenable to cultivation and growing here in San Diego. I've seen them in San Diego County, but I'm pretty sure you could probably grow them here in the city of San Diego. But another thing you want to look out for, gray pines have 3 needles per bundle. Torrey pines are actually quite an odyssey in the yellow pine group, having 5 needles per bundle. So, Torrey pines are not the only pine. I believe Apache pine, Pinus engelmannii of Arizona and Mexico, I believe that's another 5-needled yellow pine. A lot of 5-needled pines are in the white pine group, the strobus section, like eastern white pine, sugar pine, western white pine, limber pine. Torrey pines are also a 5-needle pine. So that's another way you can determine. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to some more stereotypical garden variety Torrey Pines, stereotypical cultivation Torrey Pines, as opposed to windswept Torrey Pines at Torrey Pines Beach, State Beach or State Park, because this area doesn't get that sea breeze like that. Right there, that's a Torrey Pine. That's your more typical round crown, broader, not extremely tall, but thicker trunk variety, or not variety, form. Those pine trees up on the hill there, those are your typical Torrey Pines. So I'm going to try to head over there and try to see if I can get to those and show you. Alright, so here we are back on our Ode to Torrey Pines. This, obviously these are younger trees, but this is typically what you can expect in cultivation. Shorter, stouter, broader, rounded crown trees. So these are your typical in cultivation type Torrey Pines. So this is what we were looking at with regards to how you'll see them planted in business districts, planted in people's yards. So this is your Torrey Pine. Younger ones are a little more upright. You see here, a little more upright. That's typically how you're going to see Torrey Pines when they're younger. So let's go over here by the other trees. And these ones should have cones on them too. Some of these have cones on them. So let's see. I can actually show you the cones, since these trees have cones close to eye level. So you can see here, definitely smaller than your coulter pine, and definitely smaller than your gray pine. Now, where some of these had some green cones nearby. This is what you're going to typically see. Just when they get older, they'll just be a lot larger than this. Trying to see if I can find a tree that has a cone as close at hand. Here's a green cone right here. I have this branch here. It's a green cone. So, and they don't have the huge claws that coulter pine and gray pine cones have. There's still a cone on the ground I can show you more at hand. They do have a pretty sharp prickle though, and they're still heavy enough to where they'll do some damage if they fall on you. So be aware. Torrey pines have pretty heavy cones too, just not as heavy as gray pines. And they are sharp at the end. Here we go again. That one looks like it's going to mature this year. So you'll see a big, huge claw sticking out of it like on gray pines. So there you have it. The Torrey pine. Pinus torreyana, subspecies torreyana. Here's some green cones right here. So yeah, they're quite large. Like I said, they're pretty large. Pretty large cones on these pines. But, and again, like gray pine, there's a bit of a grayish cast. Then remember, five needles per bundle. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. There you go. 5 needles per bundle, which is unlike anything gray pines and coulter pines. As mentioned before, that Torrey pines in the wild have quite a really small natural range from around La Jolla to just past Del Mar. Very small strip of coastline, and that's the Pinus torreyana. And also, necessary to mention the Pinus torreyana insularis, and that's the Santa Rosa Island Torrey pine, which grows on the southeastern side of Santa Rosa Island. And Pinus torreyana insularis does not have much of any significant difference in its DNA. I believe what I've read is that the populations of the Pinus torreyana, this guy, and Pinus torreyana insularis are nearly identical, if not identical. So they're very closely related, and it might just be 2 races, subspecies based on geography. So there you have it. You got to see some really interesting looking Torrey pines on the side of the hill in a little gulch, and you get to see what they normally look like in cultivation. So that's going to basically do it for this ode to Torrey pine. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you on hope to get another one of these cranked out pretty soon. Thanks for watching my ode.